Welcome to That's
That's
High
high praise.
Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast.
I am your co-host VH Zest.
I'm your other co-host, Captain Nostalgia.
All right, Josh. So I think we've talked about this one before, talked about covering this one before. This month we are doing Red Rock West.
Words cannot describe how much I've wanted to cover this and for how long. This has been like probably top five films of Nicolas Cage that I've wanted to cover, and I'm so excited to be talking about it this month.
So why this one? Why, like we have many to cover, many we've done, many we're looking at the list, like what we have to do. It's a little daunting. So why this one? I feel like this random 1993 release is kind of random.
Yeah, so this movie is really random. So just so you guys know about like just to kind of put this in perspective, this movie does not have an American Blu-ray release. It is not streaming anywhere. This is one of the hardest films to find. I imported my copy from the UK. I think you lucked into a DVD copy, didn't you?
Yeah, I just got on DVD. I'm an eBay guy. I just looked on there. If you have like Josh, if you have a broken Blu-ray player, I mean broken in the, software sense, then you can get the Blu-ray and play it. I don't know if mine is or not. I didn't want to risk it. Yeah, so I just got the DVD release. There was a little discrepancy Josh found. There's apparently a 98-minute cut and then a 100-minute cut. I have some suspicions of if that includes anything extra or if it's just like when they started and stopped the runtime.
It's yeah, it I don't know. I watched the 98-minute one. I'm excited to see
Same.
the 2 minute difference. Because like my Blu-rays like don't tell me like which version it is. So like I put in the
Okay.
first disc and I was just like hoping that it did, but Plan B did a really they just went above and beyond for the release. Not only does it come with a poster, like a booklet where you can kind of like get like behind the scenes factoids. It has commentaries, as film historians kind of do like interviews, like people that produce this movie sat down. It's a great release if you love physical media like me. Um,
Yeah.
but all of that to answer your question, I wanted to see this movie really bad because this is the trio of David Lynch around this time. So Nicolas Cage did Wild at Heart, which we will cover on here. Lara-Flynn-Boyle is hot off of Twin Peaks, and then
Yeah, I was gonna say she's a Twin Peaks guy. Yeah.
Dennis Hopper is was the villain in Blue Velvet, which is such a mesmerizing performance. He also did a great job in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
And of
Uh
course in Super Mario Brothers.
yes. Uh so
And in
like
Waterworld,
yeah.
which nobody ever remembers that movie.
So like I was curious more than anything because I wanted to see Dennis Hopper and Cage both together. They're such theatrical eccentric guys that I really wanted to
Yeah.
see what the two of them could do together on the screen. And yes, I don't
Yeah.
know if we want to share general thoughts or feelings yet. So
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm gonna come out the gate. I should just preface, this is not my kind of movie. I'm not like a drama thriller kind of guy, which is basically what this movie is. Um, this movie starts out very simple and then it just gains in complexity toward the end. That's not to say there are like twists and turns. There kind of are, but it's not like there was some giant subplot. It just the snowball keeps rolling and it keeps just picking up steam. And it's I mean I liked it. I'll say that. It's definitely not a movie that I think I would have watched um, as just a casual movie fan. And even as a Nicolas Cage fan, not something I probably would have prioritized. But I did like it.
oh, oh my dude, I love this movie. Like this is like the first like trivia that I will give on today. This film holds a 97% on Rotten
On
Tomatoes.
Rotten Tomatoes. I noticed that. Yeah,
And
that's That's insane.
I I 100% think that it is actually also his highest rated movie. And it also shares the only
Cages?
on Rotten Tomatoes, the only other film that also sees a 97% is Pig, which
Wow.
is rightly so. I think that
Yeah.
this movie like just suckered me in. I really fell for like Michael. I thought that Cage does a great performance, but like you described like the snowball, and I texted you after I finished watching this, and I I get a little bit like some movies, like if you can like invest me as a viewer, I really like go all in, and this movie had me 100% all in. I was completely like just anxiety ridden watching this movie, and I loved every second of it because it just kept going and going and going, and just like like you said, like it's not really like twists. It's just like there are so many different things that happen, and the
Right.
story just grows at like such this like aggressive exponential pace that like it continues to grow, and I absolutely loved every second of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just to kind of set up just some, just some light setup here. We're not going to get into too many heavy details yet. But this movie starts out with Cage. You don't really ever really get his occupation specifically, but Cage is this character. He's kind of living out of his car, or he's kind of on the road. He has a bum leg. You find out later what that's from. And he starts, and he's just yeah, he's a Texan, but he's on the road. He has a friend who's trying to hook him up with a job on an oil rig, and he doesn't get the job because of his bum leg, and that's just kind of where he is. He's just looking for work. He's got $5 to his name. He puts that in his gas tank and ends up in Red Rock, Wyoming, and is mistaken for a contract killer.
Yeah, I love the fact that that's kind of like the outline, and like that's really all you need to know. Like if you just kind of like understand that this is a case of desperation and mistaken identity, and just let
Yeah,
the movie just kind of take you away. I think viewers will definitely be in for a good film. I love the fact that like on Rotten Tomatoes, like it talks about how this film is a hidden neo-noir gem, and that's like the way that it describes it. And I think
interesting.
that's such a profound way of like kind of just talking about this movie in a way that like, I think we're getting to the whole point of this podcast is to like get into is to answer the question which one of Nicolas Cage's films are really worthy of high praise.
Right.
And we've seen good, we've seen really bad. I think one of the things that I really loved about this one is that it proves that like when you look at Cage's filmography, um, right around this time, just to kind of give like clarity, like he is he's a couple years is Amos and Andrew, Honeymoon in Vegas,
Yeah.
Deadfall, Guarding Tess, some of these other films that we've covered on here, but there are so many of these like hidden gems in his like early 90s career that just go unnoticed because like the later half of the decade with, Snake Eyes, Face Off,
Con Air.
Con Air,
Yeah.
The Rock, like all of these movies really
Gone. Yeah.
outshadowed his it kind of like set him up to be what he was in the new millennium.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. I love hearing. So, I don't know if you guys have seen Vampire's Kiss, listeners. It's something. But Cage references it quite a bit when he talks about his career, because it allowed him to sort of break out and just kind of explore a lot of his darker, more like monster movie sort of German expressionistic influences, which he has many of. And he ends up being really known for that, I would say, to a fault. Nicolas Cage is known for his Nicolas Cage isms. He's goes from whispering to yelling for no reason to whispering again. Things like that. And it's around this time, around 92, 93, that he really starts to actually find that voice in his acting style. And it comes through only a couple times, but very, very effectively in this film. Just great outbursts of emotion and stress. And yeah, it just works really, really well with the pacing of the film itself. Because he keeps his cool for the most part as a character, but then as the movie's plot thickens, he, is able to do so a little less and less.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's been interesting doing this podcast to kind of like better understand and formulate really where his signature mannerisms have kind of developed and like which movies like definitely which performances I'd rather say like emphasize them more or utilize them more. And I think one of the things that is really like I'm gonna jump into spoilers now. So if you guys haven't
Totally.
seen Red Rock West, I highly recommend go checking it out and finding a copy. Um, this is your spoiler warning, and I'm putting a spoiler warning on this because this is an extremely hard movie to find. So if you haven't seen it, we highly recommend checking it out. Any Nicolas Cage
Yeah.
movies worth checking out. Uh, but
Mm, mm, mm.
look, if we're Nicolas Cage fans, we have to recommend his
We are.
movies.
That's true. From a biased perspective, Josh is correct.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really interesting about his character arc through this is the fact that, there's a point earlier on in the movie where he gives away $5. And I think it's really interesting talking about some of the themes in this movie, especially just kind of given what I know of your story, Micah, that like there's this sense of desperation to him and what that desperation looks like. And from someone that is also kind of experienced life on the road to a degree and like
Yeah.
understanding the desperation of not knowing where your next meal's coming from, not knowing where your next paycheck's coming from, where you're going to lay your head that night. I thought this film did a great job at kind of exploring the mental health aspect of what that lifestyle is like.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the film, especially in particular, does a really good job at portraying what that lifestyle, like what temptations that lifestyle brings, and how that lifestyle calls your character into question constantly. Um, because of a lot of reasons. When you are not in a secure place in life, you find yourself with an unexpected amount of freedom. And that freedom tends to mean like because you don't have a permanent place of residence or someone always looking over your shoulder, like a boss or a community, you can just the temptation to just get away with things is constantly there. And you see really early on that Cage's character is very, very stand up. He doesn't want to get this job that he could have gotten because of his leg, and it's kind of a back and forth. Like he needs the job despite having a hurt leg, but he's not willing to get the job without being upfront about the leg because that wouldn't be the right thing to do. And that's constantly what the movie is about. And there's this kind of back and forth tugging with Cage really being his character, Michael, be really being a good guy, but also struggling to feed himself, and figuring out like, oh, well, I can get this money, and then going, oh, well, how can I get this money and still do the right thing? Um, and just kind of that back and forth. And you're really right. Like really that sort of desperation really tests your character, I think, more than a lot of people realize who haven't necessarily been at that point.
Yeah, I did some I don't want to say some shady things like I've never like broken or like stolen anything, but when you don't know where your next meal's coming from, it is and I when I toured like I mean I only toured like, a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there, so it was never like
Sure.
extensive. life, like where some of these bands and missionaries, like what they do in terms of going on the road and for months to years at a time. And it really does. Like I didn't have any accountability. I didn't have anyone kind of like holding my hand. And man, like I made some like really poor financial decisions in that way, and like some really poor like ethic decisions as well.
Yeah.
Um and I love the fact that like Cage is kind of like Michael throughout the course of this film is constantly on the the up in front, like you said, like in the job interview, telling them about his leg, paying the guy for gas that when he could have just like run away, and like even like the scene where like he essentially like double crosses Wayne
Yeah.
Wayne and so like the whole, like just for context, like he gets hired mistaken as a hitman, takes on the job, gets half paid, goes to the target, which happens to be Wayne's wife, played by lara-flynn-boyle, double crosses Wayne, takes the cash, goes to get food, and then writes the sheriff of the town to like tell them about this conspiracy for murder. And again, like it's one of those things that like he's still like doing the right thing, did the questionable things, but like he's still doing the right thing at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
like even the end, man, like the end, like I'm not gonna lie, like it had me cheering like vocally to where like
I loved the end. Yeah.
where yeah, so like where he like takes all of the money that they like stole and just like throws it out the window and says, I'm not gonna do anything. And then like the wind like blows back in this good stack for him to kind of like start over and start a new life.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's really it's great. Just the way they kind of play that. And you have kind of on the other end, like on the other end of the, I guess, moral spectrum, you have like Hopper's character or yeah, the Wayne character. Wayne is the guy who pays Michael to kill his wife, but then Wayne actually ends up being the town sheriff. He basically bought his votes uh, to be sheriff, and so that gets really, really complicated. But you see just this constant string of just like lies and people just turning on one another, and Cage is like he's doing his best to like look out for number one without compromising those around him at the same time. And it's kind of amazing. It really is kind of amazing. Like there's one point where he gets effectively kidnapped and he's like made to drive a car and he um, you figure like if you're in the front seat of a car, like it doesn't matter if it's somebody's pointed a gun at your head. Like if you want to crash the car, they can't stop you. Not
Yeah.
really, and he's still just uh yeah, he's still just really knuckles under, not in a way that where he's just like passive, but in a way that he almost is like biding his time, going along with instructions so that people aren't getting hurt. Yeah, it's really satisfying.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the kidnap scene being kind of like speaking to that, and that desperation of just his character. You know, you I feel like in the sense of desperation, like you can make some like it's really easy to make those like moral lapses.
Hmm.
Um, and like we never I always had a pastor say that like it's always uh reputation is what people see. It's what you put out, but character is what you do behind closed doors. It's those that know
Sure.
you intimately, those that run into you at the grocery store. Like that is the kind of person that you're being and you're putting out into the world. And I think that the fact that we get to see him, you know, we get to see both of those. We get to kind of see the reputation of Cage and kind of the interaction that he has at Red Rock, but also at the same time, like we get to see the character that he is, where he's in the car or he's in the grocery store, or even prepping for the job interview. And I think that speaks a large portion to like the challenge of this film in terms of like a mental health takeaway is like, what type of person are you? Like, what kind of
Right.
things are you putting out into the world? Does the
Yeah.
reputation match the character, and vice versa?
Yeah, especially if you're someone who like does believe in, karma or reciprocity, things like that, like if you kind of get out of life what you put into it,
Hmm.
then like that's something to really consider very heavily, especially in those times of desperation, especially in the times of like where doing the participating in survival of the fittest kind of looks pretty good compared to doing the right thing, you know. But nevertheless, like if you are, like I said, one of those people who believes in karma or reciprocity, like um, it can get you pretty far. Just the idea that like, because you said, character and reputation, like um, your character is what you maintain always. But if it really is, if that's really your character, if you really have quality character, then you're gonna build a good reputation, and you're gonna find yourself in like better and better situations, or people like are willing to vouch for you, people are willing to help you, things like that. Um, or at least it's more likely. Um, not so much for Cage's character in this film, but nevertheless.
Yeah, I just to go kind of build off of that. I also think that like uh I may be speaking completely out of my bunghole here, but I would generally say that like at least the people that like I've interacted with that have less and kind of border this like desperation or have gone through desperate seasons, like their mental health is a lot more uh happier, a lot more healthier because they understand what that desperation is. They understand that feeling of gratitude and thankfulness when they
Yeah,
understand where that meal's coming from, or like how hard someone's worked to prepare that meal.
yeah,
Um, and man, like I think it's really fascinating to kind of get to see how his morals and his values are never tainted by those around him.
yeah,
Um, and I think his character here is very similar to his character from Pig, to bring that up again. Um, to where, you know, yeah, I feel like I'm just like kind of talking in circles because I really loved his character arc throughout the course of this film, and I thought it was just really well
mm,
articulated in terms of
yeah,
like capturing that mental health journey and like what it's like to walk in that. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned Pig, because I think that you're right. In that movie, he's very much like, again, he's not passive, but he's more like submissive, willing to like lay down what he has to do something for others, even if it is kind of himself in a way because he's just trying to get his pig back. It's still like it's only so selfish. He's not out here like trying to screw other people for his own benefit. That's not at all what he does. It really reminded me, honestly, this movie reminded me a lot of his character in I forget the character's name now. It Could Happen to You.
Oh
The
yeah, really
following
stand
movie
up. Yeah.
or the following year. Yeah, it was the same sort of deal where it was just like um you have this just absolutely upstanding person, just absolutely unwilling to compromise himself, his character, um, and even when that does get called into question, um, he's willing to go through great lengths to to right the wrongs. And
Well,
that's all I have to say.
yeah. I think that we've kind of talked at both from a personal perspective and analyzing the film. Um, I am really curious to hear your thought on some of the. I know you. You're not a twist guy. You hate twists. So
I didn't feel that there were any twists in this movie.
some I would argue like I did not see the whole like Wayne being like I think it's mostly with like Wayne's character, but like as soon as Hopper showed up, I was like Texas plates. This is clearly Lyle, the guy that Cage is
Yeah,
impersonating. So like that like didn't throw me, but like the two scenes that got me were when it was revealed Wayne was the sheriff and when they were revealed to have fake aliases and actually be bank robbers.
yeah,
Those two things, I was like, oh, the plot
yeah.
thickens.
The second one really got me. The first one, like, I guess it's kind of a twist, but it was also just like, to me, it just made the film that little bit more interesting. It didn't feel like it changed a dynamic too much because it was always so there was like the sheriff and there was like two deputies. The deputies didn't really have that sort of like paid out loyalty to their sheriff.
No,
So I never really felt like him being the sheriff really drove home a lot.
sure.
Um, not at least not in the long run. Um, and then you're right. I think you could really consider the fact that like he and his wife had basically pulled like a money laundering heist, changed their names. You could consider that a bit of a twist. But even then, it really just kind of fed into the story that like everybody in this plot, whether it's the Suzanne character, Wayne, or the Lyle character, all of them, they just want the money 100% for themselves. That's the reason why Wayne hired Lyle to kill his wife, so that the only other person who knew where the money was that they had laundered was dead and he could keep it all.
Yeah.
And so like the reason it didn't strike me as a twist is because everything just kind of made sense. It felt like a natural progression despite the fact that it was, a bit of an unveiling.
Yeah, I see. I guess this has like always been my I don't know if you want to call it downfall. I tend to not overanalyze movies until after I've watched them. And I feel like that like loosey-goosey approach to viewing has given me an advantage to where like twists still shock me. So like I'm not looking at like the
Sure.
relationships between like uh the what's the guys, the Wayne Brown who's
Yeah.
JT Walsh in this. So like I so that like the two deputies, like I'm not like looking at like that, like, oh, there's clearly something missing a
Yeah.
foot here. Uh,
Sorry, I'm used to like
you're
watching a
fine.
bunch of like detective mystery kind of stuff.
Yeah, and like I'm typically like I'm kind of all over the place with my viewing. So like uh, horror is probably like my bread and butter, but like I'm literally kind of all over the place. I'm currently, as we're
Yeah.
recording this, going right through like all of the 90s Batman again in anticipation for the Flash. So like I'm kind of like I'm kind of like all over the place cinematically. So it really depends on like my time of year, the mood, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
Batman's not a detective movie. That's you're right.
it's
Good
not,
point.
it's not, it's a superhero movie, but um, I have feelings.
Batman's not based off of a detective.
Yeah, follow me on Letterboxd to for my true feelings on these movies. Um, but I don't know, man. Like the whole like bank robbery scene really threw me. I was like, okay, like I didn't see this coming. This
Mm,
really was great. Like it put everything a lot more into like perspective because like it seemed like a little odd where he was like instead of like a divorce, he's like gonna hire a hitman. Like it just seemed like too extreme of a reaction. Like if you're having
mhm.
problems with your wife to just go that route. But when you kind of have a large like the story, the rest of the story in focus, you're like, all right, this makes more sense.
Yeah, I think they really did a good job at like so earlier on in the movie, as Cage's like character is approaching to kill Suzanne, he sees her out in a field riding a horse, and then she approaches another man.
Mhm.
And so it's really satisfying the way the movie's written because um, you're kind of just visually led to believe like, oh, this guy wants to kill his wife because he knows she's having an affair, and then like little later on you're led to believe like, oh, she was left a bunch of money, he wants to kill her because divorcing her would leave him with nothing, and then the truth finally comes out. I thought that all was like really satisfying, just kind of like the turn of events and just you're kind of finding out like the truth little by little. You're getting closer and closer to the truth before it's revealed. I thought that was really, really satisfying. It was really well written. I can understand why it was called a noir because you have that sort of mystery aspect. And I would go so far, and I'm going to do this again. I know I've done this before. I would go so far as to call this a Western because a lot of westerns rely on you on like dialogue less communication, and this movie did a pretty good job at that,
I will say
and
that
it's in the West.
Yeah, I will say that I made the argument before watching this movie that this was Cage's like true Western debut.
Sure.
But obviously it ended up being the old way, which was yeah. Go check out our episode on the old way. And find out more. But yeah, I think that like after watching this, especially with one of the things that like really hit the whole like noir thing home for me is like the last 20 minutes of this movie. The way
Hmm.
that the colors are muted, the way that
Yeah.
shadows are heightened, and like just the way that everything is shot here in this last one and the tension, everything feels like a noir. I thought the
Yeah.
the final act of this movie, the way that it is shot, was spectacularly beautiful, just simply a breathtaking, amazing, and definitely one of the technical highlights of this movie. And I think
Yeah.
it definitely is what made me walk away and be like, man, this was absolutely 100% a noir. And I could definitely like see your argument for the Western as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like Western films and noir films, given like the time frame of each, the height of their popularity, like there's a ton of like stylistic crossover.
Sure.
It's not like a I don't think it's really serves a point to argue one way or another.
So you mentioned something earlier that I want to talk about, and it is the scene where we're first kind of introduced to lara-flynn-boyle's character,
Mm.
and her character is riding on a horse, and it's kind of like almost set up to be that affair sequence because like she's she's seen with a another man that's not her husband. It's revealed like later on who that is, but there's a scene
Yeah.
where
But before that reveal,
y-
it's kind of confirmed that she's, a
yes.
little, you know, a
Yeah,
little promiscuous.
promiscuous, yeah. And like I love the I love how it back in like 1993 and even watching this 30 years later, this movie kind of speaks now to where it says that like marriage is like she says in one scene where her and Cage like have sex, that marriage is a state of mind. And
Mm.
I love I love how like that speaks to how differently um all of us see the subject of marriage and commitment.
Yeah,
Some of us I feel like because we live in a culture now where like divorce is like more prevalent and marriages almost kind of seem like they're decreasing. Like I think that
yeah,
this definitely speaks volumes to kind of like the current state of where we're at, and we're
sure.
we're both married and we have been for several years.
Yeah,
Um
not to each other.
Not to each other. Good point, good call. But you know, I don't know, man. I think that it like especially nowadays where like marriage rights seem to be like decreasing, where it's uncertain if you're depending on the state you live in, like interracials are marriage is being challenged right now, interfaith marriage is being challenged right now,
Mm.
same-sex marriage is being challenged right now, and like it almost kind of looks like we're heading towards this like state of like marriage actually being a state of mind, not a piece of
Sure,
paper or a wedding
not a
ring. Yeah,
contract.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think you always have common law marriage.
Yep.
I think nobody's challenging that, and I think that's particularly interesting. Um, also like, but also there's other complications that come in with that, where it's like, oh, if common law marriage is a thing, then if two dudes are roommates for 7 years, does that make them common law married? Does it? I don't know. Um, I genuinely don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right though. Like it definitely like, it does just give like that perspective of like, it makes you question, okay, where is this woman? Where are her priorities? Um, and how does she view life? Because in that moment, I was kind of really wondering, and I think you're kind of wanting to, they're kind of leading you to believe that like maybe Cage's character is wondering um what her motives are, what her intentions are, even with him,
Yeah.
and because like, is he just a means? Because she was probably sleeping with some other guy, and now all of a sudden, for basically no other reason other than alcohol, she's like sleeping with Cage's character, and where is this going? And it uh, kind of causes you to like really ask that question. And I think that's like maybe one of the earlier times, even though it's like closer to halfway through the movie,
Mhm.
you really begin to question like her character, because up until that point, she was just a victim.
Well, she wants to go to Mexico.
Yeah, but why? That's the thing I'm saying, why? But yes, she says Mexico like a dozen times in
Let's
like 20 minutes.
tell me about Mexico. Yeah, yeah, I think it does speak to her. And it kind of almost gives this like parallel journey between her and Cage where she is clearly very much wanting a new start, wanting to kind of just start fresh from where she was to where she is going and
Yeah,
where she wants to go, and wherever she wants to go is uncertain, but it's
yeah,
very clear that like she doesn't want this old life, she doesn't want this marriage, she doesn't want um anything to do with it. She wants to just kind of start clean. And I think it's really interesting to also to gauge from like a not only a character perspective, but um just how similar those journeys are. And Cage's I feel like is he's more willing to do the right thing versus where
Yeah.
she's like, I am ready to like screw over and murder basically anyone that gets in my way.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you
Um,
go ahead?
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Did you want some trivia facts real quick?
I do. Let's do trivia. Yeah. That's good.
All right. So originally, co-writer and director John Dahl wanted Dennis Hopper to play Wayne in this movie, but he insisted on playing Lyle from Dallas. Uh, I don't know that I would have liked this movie as much as I did had Dennis Hopper played Wayne.
Sure. Yeah, I think I was gonna say like Cage's performance is great in this movie, and the other really noteworthy performance is Hopper
Hmm.
as Wayne. Like there are so many moments where he's just like you could see he's this like weirdly friendly guy and like just kind of wants to be liked, but other moments where he's like off his freaking rocker, just like kind of nuts. And but it's never like it never doesn't make sense or feel unnatural, but it's almost like Dennis Hopper is trying to play Nicolas Cage playing this character. And it's kind of a blast.
That's why I think I gravitated to both performances as much as I did, is because when you watch him, he has very similar mannerisms. He's a very it kind of almost feels like an Elseworld of like what would happen if Michael wasn't desperate, but like still like retained the same values, but was like well off, but kind of shady.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would actually be about it. So yeah, so Dwight Yoakam brought his own plays a part in this movie as the truck driver. Um he brought his own pistol for this role, and in the credits, his now hit single, "A Thousand Miles from Nowhere," is used. The version that's used in the film is actually a studio demo version, unlike the version that has actually been released and now is famous.
Okay.
So I'm not a country guy by any means. I think you might be a little bit more country than I am.
I for sure, but I don't know who that is, nevertheless.
No, Dwight Yoakam?
Mm-mm. I'm very new to the country game. Very, very.
Okay, well,
Like couple years. Yep.
uh, this film is one of the most successful independent films to ever be released in the 1990s, and this was due to the
Wow.
fact because the film was doing so well at a second run movie theater like in cities like San Francisco and New York City. I miss second run theaters so much.
I don't know what those are.
So second run theaters were this idea of streaming before streaming. So basically, you would get these theaters that would play films in their current rate first run, which is kind of what we experience now with Alamos, AMC's, Regal, Cinemarks, etc. The second run theaters were like mom and pop theaters that would you could get admission for like $1 to $3, and it wouldn't be until like they were out of like the first run theaters. So it was
Cinema Cafe still does that.
okay. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, I don't know if all of them do that, but they're fairly known for doing that, and they're always multiple dollars less per movie per
Yeah.
ticket.
Yeah, so like the in around this time, what you would do is you would have first run theaters, you would have second run theaters, and then you would have home movie. That was kind of the gist. Second run
That's amazing.
theaters would typically they'd cost less and they would get the movies 3 to 5 months after it had kind of made the majority of its money.
Wow.
Um, it was selling out their theaters despite the fact that the film was already on a home movie and appearing on cable around 1993. Even when theaters were selling out, people who couldn't get it into the screens went into their local video stores to rent the movie and watch it on cable when it was shown. The film's success still surprises even director John Dalt. And this out of every trivia fact I've come across, this is the most surprising to me 30 years later that this movie is one of the most successful indie films of the year of the decade. And it is so hard to find on physical media and streaming.
Yeah, that is really weird. Um, yeah, I don't imagine why that would be. But I mean, how long, like, because it may have been extremely popular, but only for an extremely concentrated amount of time,
That's also
not for the whole decade.
that's also true, but like most movies, like you can find them like most movies that aren't on like your Netflix or Hulu or Hulu or HBO Max, you can find them on services like Hoopla, Tubi, Pluto, like these like free streaming
Yeah,
services.
yeah. I don't know. That's weird.
So to counteract that previous statement, this film was originally set to be released by Triumph Pictures after their initial film that was released at the box office was a disaster. The company did not see the film as a moneymaker and backed out of its release agreement. The film would sit on the shelf for almost a year and eventually came to a agreement with Columbia TriStar Home Video for the video and cable rights. Then a movie theater owner in San Francisco asked for the film to be shown in his theater, and Columbia TriStar agreed. And much to the owner, the film was making money and selling out despite the fact that the film was on home video and appearing on cable. The film would eventually be shown at the 1993 Toronto Film Festival, where it received great reviews and still did not get a distribution deal with any major studio, but was still very successful.
That's why you can't find it. That right there.
But so I own a boutique label of this movie. You own a DVD copy.
Hmm.
My copy is distributed by Universal. What is yours distributed by?
Let me find out. I'm seeing Polygram, Filmed
Interesting.
Entertainment.
Okay, I'm pretty sure they've actually gone under now. Um, but
1998 layout and design, Columbia TriStar Home Video. Yeah, I don't know. I also have the feeling that this is like a extremely old DVD. Like this is like one of a very early DVDs released period.
sure.
Still
Uh,
has one of these guys in it, which they don't do anymore.
oh yeah, I still have a couple of those. All right, so my last one that I am going to give you, this is the last trivia fact I have for you. Included among the American Film Institute's 2001 list of 400 movies nominated for the top 100 heart-pounding American movies. I don't know if it made it on the list or not, but it was nominated by the AFI.
The band?
No,
Amazing.
yeah. Anyways,
Dang.
is there any other thing that you would choose to talk about in this movie?
Um, I don't know. So Eric Singer, he's a famed like dialogue and language expert. He has this YouTube video where he's going through like really famous portrayals, in particular of just accents, just actors doing accents that are not their own. And he gets to Con Air, um, and he kind of just is like, I don't know what this actor's doing here. Like he's just like kind of blows through it. Like does not credit Cage really very highly at all for that, I guess, allegedly Southern accent. I feel like my wife actually brought it up earlier today. I think Nicolas Cage is actually really good in some of these like Western sort of Texan accents. I think he has at least in this movie, he is for sure. He just has a very good way of speaking kind of not lazily, but kind of has a relaxed sort of speaking. He drops all of his G's. He kind of, he's like, he just, I don't know how to say it. I don't have like the technical words for it. But I don't know. I think he does a really good job. My wife pointed it out today, and I don't think I would have thought about it. But yeah, I don't know. If you see him in interviews, the a few times that he does interviews and he does like just break out into an accent for some reason or other, he's fantastic. I don't know. I guess I just kind of wanted to pose that question. What are your thoughts on Cage's ability to do accents? I know that film where there's two films actually where he plays that like actually plays the antagonist where he's like that fat old guy with the glasses. What was it? Deadfall was one of them.
Yeah, no, you're thinking of Arsenal, which was the sequel to Deadfall.
Arsenal. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I have our master list pulled up here, just kind of going through, and yeah, you're right. Like he definitely is able to kind of do a lot of these accents really well. I think did he kind of like had an accent a little bit for Outcast as well. He had kind of like a Midwest accent for Army of One. It was really
Hmm.
good.
Yeah.
And then like even Between Worlds, like I mean, he also kind of plays like a Southerner in that film as well. And
Hmm.
I think he does a really I think you're right. Like he does a really good job at kind of like articulating the dialect for what the character needs, but also it's very subtle to where it feels like an extension of the character and kind
Right.
of demonstrates how Cage is able to really disappear into these roles. And it's not like you don't really see Nicolas Cage until he gets into his like signature mannerisms. But
Yeah.
you watch some of these movies and you're like, okay, like this is a character that is being played by Nicolas Cage.
No, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think he mentions that he did an interview recently. What was it? I think it was the Colbert interview, one of the Colbert interviews. Um, where he talks about Renfield and the accent that he does for that, and he does kind of an example of it, and it's fantastic. The thing I think is the most interesting is he's a very, very, very prominent Italian American, and he's just not known for sounding like it at all. Does not sound like he's from Brooklyn or Jersey. Doesn't sound any sort of Italian. Um, I think that's really funny. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up. I think like it's maybe not like the tightest of his skills, but I think it's one that maybe doesn't get enough credit sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the last thing that I want to say before we decide whether or not this movie is worthy of high praise, I just want to leave it with this. There are two words. Lau has two word, and he turns to Cage at one point and says, "Choose life." That's the whole purpose of what Victims and Villains does, is we just want to let you know that you are not alone, that you have hope, that there are resources, and that you have value. And that's all I want to say on that. Because I think those two words, choose life, 100% just reflects the heartbeat of not only That's High Praise, but the larger parent company of Victims and Villains. So,
Yeah.
Micah, is Red Rock West, worthy of high praise.
It is. This movie is definitely worthy of high praise. I think that its success alone, um, speaks to that. Nicolas Cage is a very polarizing actor. It's part of what we love about him. He has a very polarizing career, and so when one of his movies is does as well as this one did, at least did, um, you know, it really should not be ignored. And this is a great film, especially if you're really into it. Like I said, it's not a genre that I really return to or seek out as a moviegoer, but that nonetheless it is a quality film. And yeah, I would say if you're a Cage fan or a fan of just the genre, find it.
100% agree. This movie is not only this movie, like you said, like is absolutely a fun time. It hooked me from its things. Um, I would even go as far as to say that this is a top 10 Nicolas Cage performances, in my opinion.
Wow.
I genuinely love this movie. I thought the tension was great. The way that it's shot is great. The score for this film is great. Hopper, Cage, Boyle, all of them deliver exceptional performances in this one. And this is probably also one of the best noir films I've ever seen that just happens to also kind of like go into that little bit of that Western feel. I absolutely freaking love this movie to death, and I cannot wait to dive more into the Blu-ray special features.
Nice. Should we be covering, deleted scenes? I feel like we've never done that.
We can. I mean, we can.
That my DVD didn't come with deleted scenes. I don't know if your Blu-ray did.
It came with. I don't know if it came with deleted scenes. I don't think it did.
Yeah, mine came with commentary. That's it.
Same. So, anyways, we are going to be covering Snake Eyes next month.
Yes,
It's
yes. I'm really yeah, I know almost nothing about the movie and that's how I like it. So I'm pretty excited.
Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes. Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything about it. It's except it's yeah. I've seen this
Yeah,
movie, so I got
cool.
so yeah. Anyways, Micah,
Yeah.
where can
I
people?
will say I'm pretty bummed that we're not covering the second Spider-Verse movie, but somebody didn't return for it. So here we
Yeah.
are.
Anyways, yeah. So I, I mean, for all we know, he could come back in another superhero movie. We don't know. June is
Yeah,
up in the air.
I know.
All right. Well, where can people find you in the meantime?
Um,
Nowhere.
Sitting on my couch in Nashville. Um, yeah, I don't know. Right now I pretty much just use Snapchat. I've been debating about like maybe making an Instagram again. I kind of miss it, but I kind of don't. So, if you really, really care, my Snapchat is crust ashed, like mustache with a D, but with a CR and then a D on the end. So CRUSTACHED.
Well, I am only really active on Letterboxd. So if you guys are film nerds like me, consider following us. If it's following me, it's Captain and Nostalgia. You guys can follow That's High Praise wherever you guys get your podcast from. And you guys can also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, as well as YouTube and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. So until next time, remember to keep on paging.